At the same time, we have not solved the building issues, the lack of building and space in any of the schools. Despite the fact that the Hood School has just been completed with a 4-room addition, and several years prior to that, the Little School with its 8-room addition, we're still out of space. In the Batchelder School, we are currently using at least half of the library for classroom space. We have no place for the office other than literally a small area that I have grave concerns in terms of safety in the building, and a number of issues that I know that we've all heard of. So while the Elementary School Building Committee is continuing in its quest to get to the light at the end of the tunnel, I need to plan ahead so that not just for next September, but probably for 3 or 4 years, we have a plan in place so that the parents, the children, and the staff all know what their education is going to look like in the coming, at least in the intermediate future. That led to the organization of what I termed a redistricting committee. We've been meeting since the early fall, and that committee is comprised of elementary principals, Mr. Nelson, our business manager, and a group of parents, all of whom are here tonight. I'd just like to introduce them. Bob Armacost from a Little School parent. We have Jane Schwartz, who is, I think she's a batch parent, but maybe a Hood parent, or she was potentially...
or is she a split parent?
She was going to be a split parent when we were looking at the first grade, because we did spot districting of 14 first graders who were uprooted from the batch and sent to the Hood and Little School. We have Carol Bingman, who is a batch parent, and we have Marcy Bailey, who's a Hood School parent. And we've spent a lot of time looking at a number of options that Bob is going to present, at least in the distilled form, trying to find different ways to solve this puzzle. And to do so with education, reasonable education, as being the primary goal. Certainly trying to keep also with reasonable class sizes, and the school committee at a recent meeting has defined more carefully what they mean by reasonable class sizes. We're trying to achieve some level of parity so that among all of our 3 elementary schools, we're able to achieve that parity. You're going to see as you go through some of these options, none of them will stand out as being striking examples of good, sound educational planning. However, we do have a commitment to move forward with what we think is the best solution at this point. As Mrs. Cleller indicated, we have 2 driving factors here. One of them will be the future longer-term status beyond next year for the Batchelder modulars. And again, to remind everyone, there are 2 modular units there. Each modular unit has 2 classrooms, a total of 4 classrooms that have been used over the last 5 years in a variety of capacities, from regular instruction to special education to music and so forth. And again, they're used based on their need. The other driving force will be determined on Monday at the town meeting. The larger question here will be not just for additional funding for additional modules for the elementary schools, but we're also requesting, because of the enrollment and the lack of space in the middle school and high school, we're asking for funding for modular classrooms at those 2 facilities as well, all of which is to be in place by September, or at least to begin that process substantially by September. So tonight, when you see and hear Bob's presentation as he walks through these matrices, you're going to see the capital costs, and those capital costs are specifically part of the warrant article that will be addressed on Monday night for additional funding, keeping in mind that there's another portion, which is the secondary portion, that's not addressed this evening here. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob Armacost, who's going to walk through the handouts that you have, and we also have a handout that'll be displayed on the video. So.
One quick question,
Yes.
if you don't mind, before we get started. We've been through a lot of different issues in the last couple of years, as you're
Yes.
well aware. When we go through this, are all of the options under active consideration in here?
Yes.
Good. Please continue.
I'll qualify that with one comment.
Okay, please.
The school committee last night did take a vote of support of the first option that you will see. It does hinge on the modular staying at the Batch.
Okay.
The vote was taken for several reasons. One being that the school committee will not meet in its entirety until next Monday night, prior to town meeting. Two, having this meeting tonight and hoping that you will give us some decision tonight so that we can continue to go forward to next Monday night. And I did state last night that that vote of support of option 1 from the school committee, and it was unanimous, was not in any way, shape, or form meant to try to influence or force or intimidate or any of those adjectives the Historic District Commission into any decision. Of course, you know that we're going to lobby you for a particular decision,
And that's your job.
and that's our job. But that vote was taken partly because we would not be together until next Monday night. And we have other decisions that will need to be made at that point. So there was a vote taken to support option 1, which you'll see when Rob discusses it.
Well, thank you for letting us know. I think that, I hope I speak for the entirety of the board, that we know the working relationship with the school committee, that I don't think there would be any doubt of any question of any undue influence or pressure or process. And I understand that as we're all trying to get all these meetings in, you folks last night, us tonight, finance tomorrow, it's hard to do a kind of catching everybody as we go along. So we understand that.
Thank you.
Sorry, please proceed.
Great, thank you. We were going to have this projected on the from PowerPoint on a projection unit, but I left the power cable at work. So for the folks on TV, we have a paper copy, and Marcy will flip us through that for those on TV. The handout here, I won't obsess on every word. I think that a lot of the stuff in here is self-explanatory, but what we do want to do is share with you, in part, the process that our group went through over the last 6 weeks, but then also the details on what the numbers are for all the options, because we've laid that all out here for you. The first page are just the objectives for what's been called the redistricting committee. It's really around creating a bridge between today and when the permanent school solution will be online. The planning assumption here is the end of the school year 2004-2005. The objectives, really revolve around balancing all of the issues, because as you'll see, there are trade-offs between cost, education quality, and also impact on the community across all the different options. So this has been a challenging project, to say the least.
Would you prefer questions during or after?
It's your call. What would you prefer?
During is easier, so we're still on the same train of thought, if that's
absolutely
okay.
fine. Sure.
I'm not sure where to direct this, so I'll direct it to the superintendent and just lob it if I'm directing it in the wrong place. What time period would there need to be a decision on the Batchelder replacement, whatever it be? And when might construction need to begin in order for the timelines discussed in here to actually be realistic? Or do we know?
Well, we don't really know, but my sense is that if construction began, if we were coming up to a question to the town at seeking funding, and sometime in the spring, then we would go out to bid sometime in the summer, and construction would begin in the summer of 2002, and it would probably be a 2-year process, 18 months to 2 years total.
Okay.
So we're looking at 2004 at its earliest, but that, again, is predicated on a spring approval for funding. That's not likely.
Okay.
So possibly the fall of 2002, looking for funding.
Might have you online if we're lucky by
Might have us
2005.
online for January of 2005, but a move in the middle of the year is always a challenge, so it could be later.
Okay, and is your estimation on construction planning, again, we're talking vague here, I'm not trying to pin you to anything, roughly similar whether we're talking about the Batch site or the Swan Pond site, or is the Batch site likely to be longer? I don't know enough about that.
I think that if the Batch site is the site of the ultimate solution, the problems inherent in that site or in that solution would be the relocation, either partially or totally, of the children in the bachelor school to some other site. And that needs to be factored into and discussed as part of the conceptual design that's just starting now on the bachelor school.
Okay.
But given the situation that we had at the Hood School, where we had really a fairly substantial renovation project going on, we had a lot of uprooting of children and staff in that school. And we also had some pretty close calls of where we had to shut school down during the school year. I wouldn't want, and that was only for a short period of time. The amount of renovation and the extent of the project that might be proposed at the bachelor school, in my judgment, again, I don't know what the elementary school building committee will say, but in my judgment, probably would require all of the relocation of children.
Thank you.
Good.
Sorry.
Given those objectives, the first thing that the committee did was just did a basic inventory of the space, what's there, what's being used, what's not being used, what are the trends going to be if you look at class sizes and the number of kids in kindergarten and in first grade now, and what are they going to look like over the next 3 years. And our assessment, if you look at slide 2, the conclusion is, not surprisingly, the elementary school space situation will require further action before the permanent solution is completed in 2005. And what we're basically going to talk about is extra space, because we're out of space. The current space barely works now. Literally every classroom is filled up right now, and then some. As Dr. Troughton mentioned, in the Batchelder School, half of the library has been taken over and used as a regular classroom. In fact, actually it says slide 7, but it's the third slide in the packet. I know this is a black and white version. This is just a version. We went and did helicopter diagrams like this with color coding to look at what's being used and what's not being used in every classroom. I don't have these in the front part of the pack for the other schools, but we've kind of built that fact base and looked at that. And the space barely works now. The other thing that's happened is, you know, because we've added modulars, there was redistricting last spring, there have been additional negative impacts on top of the place just being full. And if you flip 2 slides forward to slide 4, this just summarizes what the negative impacts that the schools are feeling and the families are feeling right now. This has not been an easy solution. It's been incredibly stressful, not only in the school department, but also in families. And, you know, as you see here, there's really 4 big takeaways here. One is that class sizes even today are too high. In particular, the 3rd grade at the Hood, where there are only 3 sections today, have an average above 25, which is significantly higher than the school committee's target of 22 per class. At the Little and at the higher grades at the Hood, they're also above targets. And when we look at the younger grades, the implication is going to be that there will need to be a 4th section added, or at least space allocated for a 4th section at the Hood, beginning next year, and then the year after that, and the year after that. And so that will basically create the need, on top of what we need today, for 3 additional classrooms above what we have today. And as we mentioned, there's no space for any of those right now. As you know, one of the other impacts is that classes are conducted daily in modulars right now. Thirdly, the Batchelder facility, as we mentioned and Dr. Troughton mentioned, is overtaxed, even beyond just being an old, outdated facility. And then most importantly, there have been negative impacts from the necessary redistricting last spring. There's really 3 elements of that where there's been a significant impact. The first is that, as you know, the Bad Shelter kindergartners have all been moved and are being taught at the Hood